Howdy, and welcome to Reproduction 1. This is the fourth in a series of 4 podcasts. This is male gross anatomy. So if we look at the cartoon, start at the bottom, we can see the tip of the penis. That's where the urethral opening is. The glands of the penis is also there. The prepuce of the penis, that's the foreskin that can be circumcised. That means you cut the prepuce of the penis. And then if you travel up through the penis, you'd be traveling in a shared reproductive and urinary tract. So that would be the urethra. If you go up the urethra in the penis, that's called the penile urethra. And then if you go up to if you follow the penile urethra up towards the top of the cartoon, where the penile urethra passes through that strip of muscle with the bulbourethral glands on each side, that would be called the membranous urethra. And then where the urethra passes through the prostate gland, that would be called the prostatic urethra. So there's 3 parts to the urethra in the male system. And then, of course, the urethra then enters the bladder. On either side of let's go back down to the penis. On either side, well, actually not on either. It looks like on either side of the cartoon, but actually the corpus cavernosum encircles the penis. And then deep to the corpus cavernosum is a corpus spongiosum, and that's both the corpus cavernosum and corpus spongiosum are erectile tissues, so they're full of that tissue is full of blood vessels that, when engorged with blood, causes a male penile erection. Okay, so that's the penis and the urethra. Now let's go out to the testes. So you can see the testes. The testes are encased in scrotal sacs. It doesn't show the scrotal sacs in this cartoon, but they would be there. So from the testes, that's where sperm is made. And then if sperm were to be ejaculated, actually sperm is made in the testes and it's stored in the epididymis. And then if sperm were to be ejected during copulation and ejaculation, then that sperm would travel from the epididymis through the ductus deferens. You can see that on the right side where it's called the ductus deferens. That's also called the vas deferens, and that's where they get the name of vasectomy, because they would either cut or tie the ductus, aka vas deferens. So the sperm would travel up the vas deferens until, so if you follow that ductus or vas deferens up to just in front of the urinary bladder, you see that the ductus deferens expands into an ampulla. So anytime any part of the anatomy sort of expands but stays part of a tract, then they call it an ampulla. So then you'd have the ampulla of the ductus or vas deferens, and that ampulla of the ductus deferens will meet with what's called the seminal vesicle, and that's a gland that secretes fluid, ejaculatory fluid, along with the sperm into the ejaculatory duct. Seminal vesicle includes things like fructose and bicarbonate ion, and we'll talk about those when we talk about copulation. But anyway, the sperm from the ampulla of the vas deferens and the seminal vesicle both secrete their fluid into the ejaculatory duct. So if you can see that in the cartoon where it says ejaculatory duct, and in that ejaculatory duct would meet with the urethra, so the prostatic urethra, and then now you've got a common passageway for both urine and ejaculate. And then the ejaculate, of course, travel through the prostatic urethra, the membranous urethra, the penile urethra, and then out through the tip of the penis. Okay, what else do they have on the cartoon? That looks good. They have, well, obviously the prostate gland and the bulbourethral glands also would secrete ejaculate fluid into the ejaculatory duct. So this is a mid-sagittal section through the pelvic cavity of the male. And again, we can see if we start at the top of the list, there's the urinary bladder and the pubic symphysis, and then the urethra, and specifically that's the penile urethra, shows the penis, the ductus deferens, aka the vas deferens, shows the glands of the penis, and then the prepuce of the penis, which is also called the foreskin, which can be circumcised. There's the epididymis, where sperm is stored. The testes, that's where sperm is made. And then the scrotum is that scrotal is made of the scrotal sac and the fat pad underneath it. So you need to have this testes in the scrotal sacs away from the inside of the body, because sperm develop better where it's cooler. It doesn't show it in the cartoon, but the testes are made of these structures called coiled seminiferous tubules, and we'll look at that in more detail when we go over spermatogenesis. Also within the testes are interstitial cells of Leydig that live between the tubules, and those cells secrete testosterone. The epididymis has a head, a body, and a tail. So the head is of the epididymis, that part that sits on top of the testes, and then the body extends from the head, and then the tail is the junction of the epididymis and the vas deferens. So in the epididymis, that's where I told you sperm are stored. That's where they mature, and the sperm that are made come with a lot of secretions, and in the epididymis, those secretions can be reabsorbed and reused, and then mostly sperm is ejaculated. The ductus or vas deferens, then, like we said, in the ejaculatory phase of copulation, that would transport the sperm to the ampulla of the vas deferens, and then I talked about how that would meet, the sperm would meet up with fluid from the seminal vesicle in the ejaculatory duct. So in this cartoon, it shows you the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, the bulbourethral gland. Those are the major glands that secrete fluid into the ejaculate. Together, these three glands produce what's called a seminal fluid. And then this just basically tells you what's in seminal fluid. These are things that you need if you are a sperm to eat and be motile, and also to make your way in an acidic vagina. So you want, as seminal fluid, you would want to be a lubricant for the copulatory act. You'd want to be basic, so that you could counter that acidic vagina that you find in the female reproductive system. You'd want seminal fluid. You'd want to bring some fructose and citrate. That's what sperm like to eat. You'd also want a coagulant, so you want it to be, and mucus, because you want the ejaculate to be a little sticky and not leak out of the vagina, because you want to get your sperm into the uterus. PG, you carry PG, those are prostaglandins that would dilute the cervical mucus, so as a sperm you could get up through the cervix and into the uterus and the fallopian tube to find an egg. You'd want to, in the seminal fluid, you'd want to have molecules that would stimulate the uterus to undergo peristalsis, so it would help push you as a sperm towards the fallopian tube. Then you'd have other molecules to enhance the motility of the sperm, so the sperm would have super little flagella to help them make their way to the fallopian tube. And also you'd have molecules, immune system molecules to kill bacteria. So this is another cartoon of the gross anatomy of the male reproductive system. So we've already looked at if you look at the bottom left, we've talked about the testes. and the epididymis. But let's look at some other things, some other layers. So the innermost layer, inside the scrotal sac, is the testes, and then covering the testes is a layer called the tunica vaginalis. So it's a tunic, it's like a coat that covers the testes. It's got some connective tissue in it. And then superficial to the tunica vaginalis would be the dartos muscle. Or I'm sorry, superficial to the tunica vaginalis would actually be not the dartos muscle, but the cremaster muscle. So if you find the cremaster muscle on the left-hand side, what that does when it contracts, it pulls the testes closer to the body. So if the testes if it's cold, and if it's too cold and the testes where you're making sperm needs to be a little warmer, the cremaster will bring the testes closer to the body to warm up the testicles. And then superficial to the cremaster is the dartos muscle. So if you look at the bottom right-hand part of the screen, there's a dartos muscle. That's also called the wrinkler muscle. So that also helps bring the testes, helps get the testes a little warmer. But the dartos muscle is also called the wrinkler muscle. So that gives the testes that wrinkled look. And then to separate the scrotal sac is a median septum of the scrotum. So if one testes gets infected, the other testes would not get infected, hopefully. There's 3 layers of fascia. So remember, I'm looking on the right-hand side of the screen. Fascia is a type of connective tissue that's tough connective tissue. So there's a fascia. There's a deep penile fascia, and then there's another layer of fascia called the superficial fascia, and then superficial to the superficial penile fascia would be the skin. There's a plexus in the scrotum called the pampiniform plexus. So I'm on the left-hand side. You can see there's red and blue tubes. So the pampiniform plexus allows the blood in the arteries, so see the red tubes in the cartoon, the blood in the arteries that's warm, it's coming from the core, so that blood is warm. It would be too warm to go to the testes, but because the pampiniform plexus, or that venous network, is bringing back cooler blood, the heat from the arteries, the testicular artery, the heat will move down its concentration gradient, down its heat gradient into the venous pampiniform plexus to cool the arterial blood that's going into the testes. So that system is called the pampiniform plexus, and it's there to cool the blood before it gets to the testes. And this cartoon, it shows the testes in a little bit more detail. So you can see the head in the cartoon on the right. There's the head of the epididymis, and this shows if you follow the head down to the tail of the epididymis, and then it goes from the head of the epididymis to the body of the epididymis to the tail of the epididymis, and then the beginning of the ductus deferens. But if you look inside the testes, it's separated into lobules. So you've seen this before, a lobule system with the septum. So septum is just a wall of connective tissue. So that's basically where the tunica albuginea dives into the testes and separates these lobules. And in each lobule is a seminiferous tubule, and that's where spermatogenesis is going on. So that's where you're making your sperm cells. So all the seminiferous tubules of the lobules will send their sperm to a structure called the reedy testes. That's on the left-hand side of the screen, the reedy testes. From the reedy testes, the sperm will travel to the efferent ductal, and then from the efferent ductal, the sperm will travel into the head of the epididymis, where the sperm is stored and it matures. And then on the right-hand side, it just shows an actual testes with the scrotum cut away. But on the back to the left side of the cartoon, I told you that the tunica albuginea is fibrous connective tissue that dives in and makes the lobules of the testes. And then superficial to the tunica albuginea is the tunica vaginalis, which is a serous membrane. So you can see how the tunica albuginea dives into the testes, and then also when the tunica albuginea folds back on itself, it becomes the tunica vaginalis.